What's up, y'all? I'm back in the M, as you can see. Today's video is going to be a little bit more on the serious side, so trigger warning, probably going to talk about sexual assault, domestic violence, abuse, things of that nature that could be potentially sensitive, so if that is something that bothers you, please click off. Um, Another thing is, this video is going to be directed strictly for the men, gentlemen out there. If you're a lady or anything else, just I would highly recommend you click off. Um, so yeah, let's get into it. So I think I want to start by saying that domestic abuse, violence, things of that nature are just a big problem in general all throughout society. Um, and I know women have their own problems that they deal with. I know women disproportionately deal with such problems. Okay, I'm not going to deny that. What I do want to bring up is the fact that I saw a statistic somewhere that said something like 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of domestic violence, whether it's sexual assault or whatever it is. But if you think about it in your own life, if you think about it in practice, how many men do you know that have spoken up about it? How many men do you know that actually have such experience or that are willing to talk about it? So I think this is something important to preface, okay? So this is where this video is sort of inspired, okay? So we'll get into that in a little bit, but one thing I want to talk about is a theme that I mentioned in a previous video. I talked something about like your fire being dimmed, right? You have a light and that light is just constantly dimmed if you're dealing with the wrong people. And so another thing is like, I'm just going to throw out a bunch of ideas. Let me know if any of this makes sense. If it doesn't, I hope this sticks with someone. I know a lot of people have heard when one door closes, another opens. And quite frankly, I'm very thankful that some doors have closed because I truly think that my purpose in life is to stand up and advocate for people that need it, whether that's men, whether that's whatever the case is. I'm very thankful that circumstances have led me to where I am today, and I want to use my voice to stand up for what's right, honestly. So I don't care if this gets taken the wrong way, whatever, dude. I truly think that like a lot of the circumstances I've been in, if like that have led me to become lonely or whatever, like this has taught me that my purpose is to stand up for BS such as domestic violence and things like that. And so this is honestly what I'm passionate about. In the past, I've been shut down so many times. Like when I would try to bring it up, the people I've been with have shut it down just nonstop, have deflected it, have just put it back. They say, oh yeah, what about women? And that's not the point. Women have the whole feminist movement. There's all these resources for women. And once again, I'm not denying the fact, and I'm not a misogynist, I'm not anything. I'm not denying the fact that women disproportionately have some problems. What I'm trying to say is that men that do encounter such issues usually don't have the outlet to speak up about it. And if they do, usually it's shut down, or it's met with, yes, but women this, yes, but that. And there should be no yes buts, okay? It's simple as that. There shouldn't be a single yes but when someone is bringing up abuse or sexual violence or whatever the case is. So one thing I want to mention is that because this idea that men don't get abused or men are the perpetrators, this whole idea has been taken so far that a lot of men I know will put up with extremely abusive relationships and they won't stand up for themselves because they can't. And if they do, they're met with all the excuses that I've mentioned. So I kind of want to use this opportunity to shed light on some of the ways that people can encounter domestic abuse or violence that may not always be hands-on, okay? So, like, a lot of guys in relationships will be nonstop gaslit. They'll say that something isn't real. You're making this up in your head. I have a whole notes document about like the things that like people can say to gaslight. And when these techniques, and men get lied to and all these things in relationships, when all these things are used in conjunction, it tends to result in men ending up getting emotionally abused, right? And so once the emotional abuse starts, it turns into verbal abuse, partners cussing out their boyfriends or husbands or whatever the case is, saying all these god awful things, and also saying it to people behind their back. And then the man, because a man is a man, is made as the problem, and all the projection that these perpetrators do defend themselves by turning the other person into the problem. Okay, so I don't want to victimize, and once again, I hate pulling the abuse card, but a lot of situations that men find themselves in when it comes to relationships are incredibly abusive. Now, taking that further, this is not to say that men don't experience sexual or physical abuse in domestic relationships as well. I know a lot of the times men are portrayed as the stronger, bigger, whatever the case is, but it doesn't always have to be about size and strength for men to be abused physically, right? And if it is, I can't tell you how many relationships have you seen where the woman is, quite frankly, bigger, taller, I'm not gonna say stronger, but she has power. It's not she's completely powerless. So when women, this is gonna get pretty sensitive. This is obviously a known problem that people force themselves onto other people, and that's a super wrong thing to do. What I want to say is when women do it to men, this should not be normalized, and men, the idea that, men should enjoy it, you're a man, that's complete nonsense in my opinion. If you explicitly say that you don't want this physical thing being done to you, and someone continues to do it and forces themselves, whether that's tackling you, wrestling you, forcing whatever physical sexual contact, unfortunately that's quite literally the definition of sexual and physical abuse. And a lot of the times it's other forms of emotional abuse and physical abuse are thrown into the mix. So let's see, I have my whole document over here. So that's why I feel like I've gotten to this place where my light has been so dimmed by when I've tried to stand up for what's right and people shutting me down and saying this is like so nonsense or whatever the excuse is. I'm thankful that I've gotten to a point where doors have shut, that I can now stand up for what's right. I can now stand up and advocate for the people that need it. And this is something I've always been really sensitive about. I said trigger warning in the beginning of the video because usually if I see a trigger warning in a video, then I'm clicking off. I half the time I cannot stand to hear or talk about that stuff. I'm super sensitive when it comes to it. So one thing I want to mention is that this idea that when men get physically abused, they should enjoy it is just so harmful and so disgusting. I feel like a lot of times women feel like they can get away with getting what they want physically because this society portrays men as disgusting monster perpetrator type people, right? And once again, I'm not saying that there's a lot of men out there. There are a tremendous amount of men that are out there like this. And I would argue even more men than women. But that doesn't mean that there aren't women out there that are going around and doing things and getting away with it. And so this is what I want to shed the light on. As a man, you have to have the clarity and almost self-respect to pull yourself out of situations like this, no matter how hard it is. That's the difference between men and women. What I've found is that women, when they have encountered abusive relationships, whether it's physically, whatever the case may be, they have more of a support system, and they have more ability to speak on it, because they're not going to be shut down with yes but this, yes but that. So as a man, the problem is you have to build this muscle of like sort of knowing, you have to know when to pull yourself out of toxic situations, right? And not only do you have to know when, you have to recognize when a situation is becoming toxic, and you have to, honestly, with the strength of your boys, with the strength of yourself, you have to gather a lot of internal strength to pull yourself out of these situations. And unfortunately, a lot of times, I've talked about this in the last video, a lot of the times perpetrators have their own mental health issues, right? So this is what I want to make very clear. Mental health issues, no matter what it is, depression, anxiety, anything, there's never an excuse for mental health issues to be used to justify abuse in any way, whether that's emotional abuse, physical abuse, none of that. And unfortunately, a lot of times these female perpetrators are dealing with some sort of mental health problem, whether that's BPD, their narcissistic personality disorder, avoidant, their bipolar. So like a lot of these ideas can lead to women unknowingly creating an abusive environment for their relationships, okay? And so this is what I'm standing up for at this point. So let me bring up, I have my phone over here. I have a couple of examples that a lot of the times people will, these are abusive things that women or men might hear in relationships that people will kind of blow off and won't really acknowledge. So gaslighting is a huge one. If someone's saying you're making stuff up in your head, or something like that, you're making this all up, or completely invalidating any problem that you're bringing up, especially when they've told you that they need to come with you with the problems, and when you do meet them with the problems that you're having in order to have a mature conversation and try to get to the bottom of things, and you're met with gaslighting and things like that, that's extremely harmful to a guy. So that's one form. Another thing is blame shifting and lack of accountability. A lot of times, once again, this is what I mentioned earlier, because men are portrayed as this figure in society, a lot of the times the blame shifting will happen so that the perpetrators don't have to take accountability for their own mental clarity, whatever the case is, so that they can go to sleep at night thinking they're innocent. So if someone is constantly telling you, you're the problem, and if someone is spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours drilling you, cussing you out, saying every single thing that's wrong with you, and when you're trying to respond and try to and say like this is the environment that was created and that's not allowed, that's another form of abuse, unfortunately. So a lot of the times, if you see men in happy relationships that are unfortunately dealing with substance abuse, this is unfortunately a lot of times these men are victims of domestic abuse, and because they have no outlet to get help or speak their ideas, they turn to drugs and things that are ultimately harmful. So it takes a lot of courage to pull yourself out of this toxic cycle. And yeah, okay, here's another thing. Invalidation and dismissal. If someone says, just be fine, it's not about you right now, or you're dismissed as making stuff up in your head, these things are all forms of emotional abuse, and they're tactics that usually people with either BPD or whatever the case is, that they'll unknowingly use to gain control in some situation, as we've mentioned before. Here's a big one. A lot of times when guys are in relationships with such people that, like, BPD, MPD, or, someone is dealing with some mental health issues, there's going to be a lot of projection, right? And so, especially if this person is a narcissistic personality disorder, if this person is constantly putting you down, if you show any ounce of confidence in yourself, you feel good about yourself, you post a picture, whatever the case is, and you're met with, you drop the ego or things like that, or look at, things, drop the ego, or look how full of yourself you are, or look at this thirst trap that you've put. These are forms of verbal abuse that narcissists usually use to try to humble you. And unfortunately, as much help as these people can get using professional therapy and all these things, the help can only help them deal with the symptoms. But they're always going to have that, because BPD changes people's brains. So they're always going to have the brain, and they can deal with the symptoms, but unfortunately there's always going to be that tendency to be a perpetrator, right? So you can excuse it as much as you want. As a man, we can say, yeah, I'm confident in myself, whatever the case is. But your partner should never be trying to humble you. Your partner should always be uplifting you. Your partner should always be telling you you're awesome for XYZ reason. When you're showing confidence, they should feed into that. They should say, yeah, I agree, you look good, this and that, whatever the case is. They should never be saying, whoa, watch the ego. Because imagine a girl gets dressed up and a guy goes and tells her, you need to watch the ego. Imagine how much he's gonna get. But if it's the other way around, unfortunately, we're forced to take it. So that's another thing. Another thing is financial abuse, right? Financial abuse comes in a whole bunch of forms, right? If you're showing that you're saving up money to build up for your future, to build up for your whatever the case may be, and so you express that you have a certain level of financial stability that's going to come in the future. If this is used against you by saying, oh yeah, you have this, but you can't get me my nails, or you have this, but you can't buy me a present, you have this, but you can't send me flowers, once again, these are all forms of abuse that unfortunately sick people will use to try to gain control of you. Let's keep going. Another thing that people in these relationships another strategy that people use is constant threatening of a discard. And so if you're in a relationship where you never feel like you're being prioritized, you never feel like you're the first choice, and they're constantly saying, if you don't do this, I'm gonna dump you, if you don't do this, I'm gonna leave, if you don't, no matter what you do, if there's always that risk of you, if they're always threatening that they're gonna pull the strings, do whatever they're gonna do, that is, once again, another form of coercion. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah. So what I'm gonna say is just be careful especially as a man, be careful for people trying to blame shift on you and say that you are the perpetrator of verbal abuse, when this is another thing. Reactive abuse is huge. When someone if someone knows your weaknesses and pushes your buttons constantly, and it gets you to a point of lashing out, that's an exact form of verbal abuse, or reactive abuse, I'm sorry. And so reactive abuse is something that a lot of times, once again, BPD, MPD people will use to gain leverage. So you have to realize that a lot of these, if the relationship can be like totally fine, you guys can be super lovey-dovey, go on trips and all this stuff, but in the back, there's always these subtle humblings, or there's always these subtle things like threatening to, like say like this is the last time and I'm never gonna, things like that. That's not a relationship that you should put up with. And I don't want to talk about the whole plenty of fish in the sea nonsense. It's like we'll talk about that another day. I don't like saying that at all. Okay, as a man, you have to be able to lead, right? And so a lot of times women will encourage you to be a leader and to lead. When you are leading, whether that's the way you lead is aggressive, whether you're just a fiery person, you're spicy, whatever the word is, and they use this against you and shut you down and verbally abuse you, saying and kind of blame shift and say that you're being verbally abusive when you have been encouraged to do a certain thing. That's another thing you have to watch out for. So, because a lot of times you'll be encouraged to lead, but then you won't be allowed to, or when you do try to lead, it is, if you're a spicy person, a lot of times people say I'm spicy. The way I talk is aggressive, spicy, whatever. But in this video, I've never cursed. I've never, I don't insult people. People will use your tone as an excuse to insult you or humble you or cuss you out. And then they'll say you're the problem. So again, this is a form of reactive and verbal abuse that no one should ever put up with whatsoever. Don't be dramatic. That's another form of invalidation that's like a form of emotional abuse. So there's all these, I just mentioned a couple different things. There's so many ways that are subtle that women and just people in general can use to emotionally manipulate and gain leverage and try to get what they want out of you without I don't know how to say it, without feeling bad, honestly, for doing the wrong thing. So unfortunately, a lot of these people have addictions, right? Addiction is a huge, substance abuse or addiction or anything is a huge problem in situations like this. And so I should not have turned my car off. It's really hot. So yeah, so where I was going with that is that addiction, when someone is breaking the cycle of addiction within themselves, they'll latch on to something else to be addicted to. And a lot of times that can be a person and the validation of a person. And so it's not necessarily the person itself, but these people will, if they're avoidant, for example, people will discard, they'll pull the trigger, they'll do the discard, and they'll expect I've said this in the last video, they'll expect you to feed the validation. And so be extremely careful of this. I, once again, mentioned this before. Be extremely careful of them. You have to recognize patterns in people's lives with their other relationships. This is why a lot of times, when people say when you're dating, see how a woman's relationship is with her dad. That's super telling. And I never really understood it. And I still kind of don't understand it. But I'm still learning. I'm a young guy. We're still figuring this out. But there's a reason that people say that. And it's because if they're constantly victimizing themselves and lashing out on the men in their life, there's no reason that they're not going to do it with you. No matter how much therapy, no matter what they do, no matter how much help they get or anything, these people have a certain brain structure. If you look at a neurologist and there's so many imaging studies about people that suffer with certain mental ailments, and it's not depression or anxiety or things that people can just pop an SSRI and go to therapy and learn how to live with it and become better. When it comes to certain mental health things like BPD and MPD, that has a strain on a person's life and all the relationships that they have in their life. So once again, as much as much therapy and professional help that they can get, and whatever medication that they're on, they can do all the things, but unfortunately they still have the tendency to do things because it's their own brain trying to protect them in a fundamentally flawed way. So I hope that makes sense. Next video I'll probably talk about these mental ailments a little more, specifically BPD, MPD, because I've been doing so much research on this lately. But yeah, this one is for the men. I just want to say, like, if you're a guy, stand up for the homies. If you're anyone, just stand up for what's right. Just advocate. I'm standing for both men and women. I'm standing up for all my female friends and sisters, everyone that have encountered such issues. I'm always standing up for people of domestic violence, right? The problem is, when it comes to men, is that the men's voice when it comes to issues like this are always shut down. So I'm using my platform, I'm using my voice right now to raise awareness. If you're a man dealing with such issues, reach out. Don't put up with abuse that you don't need to. I get you like this person, but I promise you're going to be better off when you're not dealing with such abuse. And again, I'm not going to bring up the plenty of fish in the sea thing. I think that's the most stupid. I don't like saying that. But yeah, be careful for the projection. Be careful for people verbally abusive to you. Be careful for be careful for people forcing themselves onto you, and when you explicitly say that you don't want such a thing and they continue to do it, and they say, oh yeah, I thought we had always consent all the time. It doesn't really work like that. Yeah, in a relationship you can have perma consent, yeah, but you're allowed to draw the line on things you don't want. If you want someone to force kisses on your face or whatever the case is, and you made that clear and they continue to do it, unfortunately that's a sign of sexual abuse, or not sexual, physical abuse. Or if someone is like literally throwing you around, if your girl is strong and she throws you around, you're saying I don't want this, and you're like using every ounce of strength to like break from this like wrestling, like it can be all cute and playful and all that, but once you stand your ground and say like, this is not what I want, I don't want, like, this is like, I don't want this anymore. You are entitled to not have that behavior, and if someone keeps doing that, that's wrong. So yeah, this one is for the homies. This one's for the 1 in 4 men that have encountered such forms of just absolutely disgusting abuse. And yeah, the video is getting kind of long. I might drop a workout. We'll see. It's Shabbat, so Shabbat Shalom. I hope you guys enjoy. And yeah, I think another thing, if you want to do some good in the world, go give a little bit of charity, you know? In Judaism, we talk about tzedakah a lot, so it doesn't have to be anything. Go give a couple pennies, you know, to charity, and it adds up over time. So my homework for you today is to go give a little bit of charity. And yeah, so once again, I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll catch you guys soon. Peace out.